Hi again, Charlene O'Hanlon here from Media Ops, and I'm here at DevOps World, Jenkins World 2018 San Francisco, having a great time at this year's show and talking to some really, really fascinating people, including on my left, Clint Sprauve, who is Director of Product Marketing at SauceLabs. Clint, thanks for taking a few minutes and talking with me today.
No problem. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm really fascinated by just walking around and seeing the number of testing companies and security companies that are here at this year's show. And you and I were talking off camera about the need for testing and the importance of testing. And so I'm wondering, do you see kind of a correlation between the fact that we've got so many testing companies here this year, so many security companies, and is it by design?
You know what? I think so. And the reason being is that what you're seeing is that and especially with DevOps and continuous integration and CD, is that a lot of companies are struggling with how can they maintain quality and release fast, release often. So there's been this term shift left, where you're shifting testing earlier in the software development lifecycle. So it's really not by chance that these testing companies are actually here today. So what you're seeing is that, especially with a lot of these, with mobile fraud that's happening, so you'll see a lot of security companies here as well. So there's definitely a correlation between the number of security companies as well as the amount of testing companies, because with those organizations struggling to maintain quality, they need to understand, how can I do that? How can I implement this into my CI/CD pipeline and do it effectively?
So what are you seeing from the community at large then when it comes to testing? I mean, what are some of the obstacles that they're facing? What are some of the the things that are kind of keeping them up at night, if you will?
Sure. I think one of the biggest areas that I've seen from at least from my customer base and prospects as well, is that they're struggling with integrating mobile into the whole DevOps process, specifically when they're trying to actually do testing. And so there's this conception of talking about whether it's using real devices or emulators or simulators. So how can I effectively do DevOps and do it consistently, and scale that testing? So what we're finding is that a lot of organizations are struggling in terms of understanding what are the tools and techniques that I need in order to do testing effectively across mobile and also for cross-browser testing.
So where are they kind of on their DevOps journey then, when they're kind of struggling with these issues? Are they closer to the start than, kind of farther down the road?
They're usually closer to the start, and part of that is because they're trying to understand, how can I make sure it's consistent across the board? So for example, what SauceLabs does, we recommend that users, that if they're doing any type of mobile development or mobile testing, that they use a healthy mix of emulators, simulators, and real devices. And the reason we talk about using emulators for Android and then simulators for iOS applications is that it's much more consistent when you're trying to test earlier in that life cycle. So you don't have the dependencies on those real devices. So you'll be able to test much earlier and often in that software development life cycle. Now, what we also recommend is using those real devices so you can actually test real world conditions. So you can do against different carrier networks and things of that nature, and making sure it's very consistent across the board. So our goal is making sure that you can take those existing tests with the emulators and simulators, push those over to real devices, and just be consistent in your DevOps pipeline.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So are the companies that you're working with then have both a mobile and a non-mobile environment that they're working with, or are they focusing solely on, say, mobile?
Actually, it's a combination of both. And it's funny because a few years ago, it was pretty much segregated. So you had a mobile dev team, and then ones that concentrated just on, the desktop browser, for Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and so forth. But now it's really a mobile first, but it's not a mobile only environment.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is actual different trends with the larger screen sizes of those mobile devices. People are using fewer tablets, but at the same time, they have to be able to support it across the board with responsive design web applications. So they have to support it across the board. So now it's really kind of a unified process in terms of what they need to make sure that they're testing for, whether it's mobile or desktop browsers.
That's really got to add a level of complexity to the whole development environment for them to have to test not only for mobile versus, say, desktop or whatever, but as you said, the screen sizes and optimizing the site for mobile. So what do they do? I mean, it just seems like there's so many levels that they have to deal with now.
Right.
So how can they do it effectively?
Well, and that's where a company like SauceLabs comes in,
Yeah.
because we have the real device cloud, and we support those emulators and simulators, but we also have same-day release for the latest devices. So whether it's that newest Samsung Galaxy or the new iPhones that were just released, the X, the XS, and the Max. So we will have those, in our data center, the moment that they drop, as well as the latest versions of the operating system. So being able to, and that's half the battle. If you can really control the infrastructure, or have a partner like SauceLabs that can help provide exactly what you need, that's half the battle, instead of you having to maintain those testing grids, and these different types of devices. We have them in our data center. We have the latest, even to older devices as well, in versions of those operating systems, around the world. So now if you need a specific device in a specific region, whether it's, APAC or in Europe, we can provide that for you. So our goal is to make sure that we can, really take the burden off these organizations so they can concentrate on doing what they do best, which is software development.
Wow, good stuff, good stuff. Clint, thanks so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me about that.
No problem,
It's
thank you.
really, really interesting.
Great, thank you.